would now like to introduce our next speaker, Annabel Vaughan, who will be leading our next presentation titled Architectural Typologies. Annabel Vaughan is an architect and project manager at ERA Architects. Her professional work has examined the use of heritage buildings as mnemonic devices for the collective memory of cities and their public lives.
I just wanted to start, I always start my talks this way, so just bear with me. I'm indebted to the territory where I'm currently living, Burnaby. I should mention that I moved back to BC to work with ERA out in Vancouver during the pandemic, but I am continuing to work on projects in Toronto. In fact, I'm working on the Kiever Synagogue in Kensington Market with Adam Cohen, who I think I saw in the audience. I'm indebted to the territory where I'm currently living, Burnaby, the unceded and traditional territories of the Skohomish, the Hamalkamin, Halkamalem, and the Hunkaminam speaking people. I want to acknowledge Toronto, a settler colonial city situated upon the traditional territories of the Wendat, the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and more recently, the Mississauga of the New Credit First Nations, among others named or not named, recorded or unrecorded. I owe all that I have and all that I am to the land that I have grown up on. I also recognize the ongoing work that must be done to challenge the legacies of colonialism and create palpable disruptive change for true reconciliation to take place. My path towards this is ongoing. Thank you also to Kahila for the invite to participate in this panel. So I'm just going to try and provide some sort of information on the table to sort of add to the conversation. And I think, you know, this slide, thanks Igor, this slide is pretty obvious, right? Cars spend around 95% of the time parked and only 5% of the time in use. Huge swaths of cities, either in parking lots, garages, or street parking spaces are used for car storage. While cities struggle to find enough land to build housing to keep up with demand. So this sort of shift in sort of understanding of cars, next slide, has been driving a lot of really interesting sort of thought and ideas and visualizations. So if parking lots became apartments, 2.5 million housing units would be added to New York City. This comes out of a piece of work that the Cone KPF Urban, sorry, can you go back, Igor? Sorry, you're going through them very quickly. The KPF Urban Interface, Cone Pedersen Fox Urban Interface Lab came up with this statistic after the next slide, please. After they produced this incredible visualization tool, this is called Spotless. You can go on the website and find it, and you can play around with the sliding bars at the bottom and turn parking lots into parks, housing, or office space. And it shows you in real time and visualization what that looks like. So, and then the next slide is another tool. This was What the Street, which was driven by the Move Lab in Stuttgart. They again took parking lots. This was done in Stuttgart. They were going to do it across Europe, but I think this project is no longer active. They visualized what all of the parking lots in Stuttgart actually looked like. So they traced all the parking lots and then put them into this visual guide. And again, you could play around with the sort of opportunities that were there. So this type of sort of speculation about the massive land grab that parking lots take in the last probably 5 years has become you know, all the rage. You can find tons of articles on it. Next slide. And with headlines, you know, sorry, can you go back a few, Igor?
Yeah, I think there might be an automatic.
I don't have any. That's on your
PowerPoint. I'm not clicking these. Sorry.
Sorry, I think that's on your PowerPoint then. Because I don't have any on these. Regardless. I don't know how you're going to, okay. So you can find articles on this all the time, all over the place. Next slide. And a lot of these apartments, like this one, next slide, in Fort Greene, you know, the issue that we come up with is that, next slide,
Oh,
is that, you know, in this redevelopment of a parking lot in Brooklyn, this large building, 290 market rate rentals and 73 affordable housing units. So the drive, you know, a lot of these parking lots are in downtown municipal areas. The pressure on the market and the value of these lots has increased exponentially. And we get this drive for market-driven returns on the site, which is fine. That's a reality of the market. I'm not sure where the slides have gone. Okay. Next. And this has come up, you know, in Toronto as well. This is a map of all of the Green Pea parking lots. And these are beginning to be challenged as potential sites. The thing about parking that's held by private, you know, like parking lots behind synagogues or parking lots behind churches, these parking lots, is that it's effectively land that is outside of the market. So there is huge pressure for cities to develop their parking lots, and there's huge potential for private citizens and private organizations to develop their parking lots, which have become incredibly valuable assets in this whole conversation. Next slide. Interestingly, the parking lot that is behind the Kiever Shul in Kensington Market has been earmarked by the Kensington Market Community Land Trust. And they are a group of individuals who have come together in Kensington Market who are looking to secure buildings for and sites for affordable housing to keep people in the market. Right, as the housing pressures intensify. They're actually looking at the parking lot at 25 Bellevue Avenue. And the land trust issue is interesting just in terms of models of how to redevelop these sites. And I'm going to talk about this later in a couple of the precedents that I've got coming up. But the issue for land trusts, of course, is securing land, and the Kensington Market Land Trust just actually managed to secure a building, and this will be game changing for them. So on June 1st this year, they managed to secure 54 and 56 Kensington Avenue. The building has 12 existing residential units, 5 commercial spaces, and 5 commercial spaces. This will begin to allow the Kensington Market Community Land Trust to actually move forward on their mission to secure land for affordable housing. The reason parking lots are valuable, city-owned parking lots are valuable, is because they can potentially be swapped for the mission of affordable housing, right? So there's some leverage going on here that's interesting. Next slide. Next slide. And of course, churches have been earmarked as one of these. The examples that I'm going to show are from Vancouver. There is, I think, and it's only because I think that Vancouver has managed to get a few of these off the ground, and I think there are a couple of reasons for that. So what's interesting in this is that places of worship have a mission that's driving their sort of redevelopment and ideas about this. Next page, next slide. So this is one of the first projects, I think, in Vancouver that actually managed to do this type of development, the Oak Ridge Lutheran Church. There are a number of other churches in Vancouver and synagogues as well, I think, that are looking at this model and are in development. But this one has actually come to fruition. So, and this I think is sort of a typical case study in terms of the types of project lands that synagogues in Toronto will face. So this is the Oak Ridge Lutheran Church, built in 1956. When it was first built, there was a thriving community of young families, but by 2016, fewer than 50 people were attending the church on Sunday. Many of them went into their 80s. And so leveraging these sites for their highest and best use, a planning concept that has fueled speculation, and in my mind created a lot of the issues we're confronting on the housing front and affordability. You know, what is the highest and best use? Well, if it's coming from a planning point of view, quite often that just means redevelopment and, you know, selling off this land to the highest bidder. But what this church group decided to do was to look at, could they convert their mission, the mission of the church, into redevelopment? And that changed the nature of the conversation on this site. And the interesting thing about where this conversation went was, if we go to the next slide, you can see there is in fact a parking lot and a little manse house behind this. And it's on quite a busy intersection in Vancouver, across from the Oak Ridge Mall, which is there's a massive redevelopment going on there. And the intent of this project was to, at the end of the day, to end up with a space for the church, a new space for the church, housing, affordable housing, and a model that generated funds so that the whole thing was sustainable and sorry, I lost the word, but it's not losing money. It's not you know, it generates funding to sustain itself. So the next slide. So this is what they've ended up with. This is Hannelore, and this is on the site of the church. Next slide. So this is mission-driven development. Hannelore is jointly owned and operated by the Oak Ridge Lutheran Church Housing Society. So they created a society to be partners with the to run the housing as well as have the space. So in this building, you can see on the bottom left, there is the doors to the church space, and it occupies the ground floor and the second floor. On the right-hand side is the retail space, which HBSC Bank is in, and that faces onto 41st Avenue. That's the retail space that is rented at market. That helps to generate funding for the whole project. And then the other piece of this puzzle is that Hannelore partnered with Catalyst Community Development Society. They are a developer that is a social purpose real estate development company. They are a not-for-profit developer, which does not mean that their projects don't make profits, but it just means that their profits go back into the projects to make them sustainable. And the OLC Housing Society owns 40% of the housing as well as their own space. In perpetuity, it's fully paid for, their church space. And Catalyst Community Developments owns 60% of the residential and the retail space. And it's a closed loop system, but it is, the Lutheran Church also gets operating funds as well for their programming. So they have their space secured, funding, and operate and provide 46 below market rental homes. So they manage this project by partnering with development entities and creating this mission-driven project. Next slide. The next one is there's not much parking on this site, but it is a downtown site and it's another church. Next slide. It's this star-shaped building. And this is the First United Church in Vancouver at Gore and Hastings. They are, next slide. So the proposal here calls for the redevelopment of the site. It's a new 11-story mixed-use building with a downsized church space, which reflects the church's evolution from a worshiping congregation to operating community ministry programs and social services. They have been in that providing social services for years now, much longer than the church was an active church congregation space. And so it's an easy shift into this mission-driven social purpose real estate redevelopment. There'll be 105 units of social housing, and which will be run by Luma Native Housing Society. So again, another partnership. They've also worked with a social purpose real estate consultant who has brought in a developer. So the whole project is driven by the mission of the First United Church, which has converted its traditional congregation mission into a social mission. So on top of the housing, there's also 40,000 square feet that will be the social service center, and it will be located on the first 4 floors of this building, featuring drop-in space, a large dining room, a commercial kitchen, multi-purpose spaces, a day sleeping area, a sanctuary, and administrative spaces. They're currently working with the city trying to get the retail requirement at grade lifted. There's a zoning requirement for that. And they'd really like all of the social services, the dining hall, the entry hall, and the drop-in center to be at grade, providing services directly to the community that they serve. It's these sorts of partnerships and development models that are driven as a sort of closed loop circuit, specifically around a not-for-profit mission, is, I think, the model that it has been very successful. And also creating these multi-use buildings that have a number of uses. Next slide. This one is not housing, but again, I'm just going to show it because I think it's a good example. This is Nutsamutsets, the Strathcona Library. Nutsamutsets is a Musqueam word, and it means we are one. I think this is the first public project that was given a Hunkaminam name. So the first sort of public building. But again, there's 2 floors of library at the bottom, and then 4 stories of housing, 21 supported units of housing. The YWCA runs the housing, and they also have 4,000 square feet of community space. So again, partnering up to produce these types of projects. And gone are the days where libraries just get to be libraries. We have to sort of bulk up these sites and make them do more heavy lifting, because these sites are sites that are outside of the pressures of the market on one side of the ledger, but without holding on to that sort of mission-driven idea about development. We can lose that, and they can enter into the market, and then it makes it very difficult to provide affordable housing. Next slide. I'm just going to show one American model, just because this is a parking lot in downtown Boston. Next slide. There's the footprint of the slide of the parking lot. And again, a city-owned property. And next slide. The proposal for this is So the Boston Planning and Development Agency awarded the rights to build on this site. So again, the land has been removed from the market and allows for this type of project to go on. And they've awarded it to, again, a consortium of individuals. The Millennium Partners are the developer. The Asian Community Development Corporation. Now, this is something that Canadian cities don't have, and it's an American model, but that is the sort of nonprofit in this entity. And then Tufts University as well. So partnering up to make these projects happen is, I think, critical. And the plan here is a 30-story tower, 45 apartments for low-income renters, and 107 condos with prices geared to low and middle-income homeowners. All of these projects that have been shown are revenue generating. Their revenue goes back into them. It's a closed loop social purpose real estate model that they're all using. And I think that this is similar to what the United Church is doing as well. And somebody's going to be talking about that, so I won't talk about those projects. And then I just wanted to end on this one note, because I think this is an interesting development. Next slide. So this report was recently put out by the Atira Women's Resource Society. And not only are they looking, are people looking at parking lots, people are looking at parking garages and repurposing parking garages, because they're built and their structures quite often quite reliable. And when the parking lots aren't used anymore, this one is in downtown Vancouver and the downtown east side, it's underutilized. And so Atira commissioned a report to look at turning this into housing for women. And it's the next generation. And I just sort of threw it in there just because I think it's interesting where this discussion is going and how parking lots are being seen and used in this conversation. So that's all I have to say. I hope that that generates some sort of speculation or interest, and I'll turn it over to the next.